and took over the boat and have the crew in custody, and they're using some kind of law they're claiming they violated a law, a Canadian law, saying that they can't come within a half a nautical mile of a seal being bludgeoned. Can you talk about some of these ways the Canadian government has tried to, through laws, through intimidation, and other things, to keep journalists and animal welfare groups away from the ice?
Absolutely. I mean, again, I've been out there for 10 years, and in that time, the Canadian government has used just about every trick that it can to keep journalists off of the ice floes. When we're up there, we're kind of a glorified taxi service. We're just there to bring journalists up to the ice. We believe, by seeing it for themselves, that journalists are in a position to tell the world what's going on and form their own opinions about the hunt. We don't believe that anybody who sees this hunt can walk away and think it's acceptable. So our primary goal in going up there is to bring journalists and reporters up to the ice floes to document what's happening. Now, over the years, the Canadian government has used a number of tactics to keep people away, but the top one is the marine mammal regulations, which require anyone going within a half nautical mile of the commercial seal hunt to have an observation permit. And to get an observation permit, you have to apply for it from the federal government, and after they put you through a criminal background check, then they decide whether or not they're going to issue it to you. Sometimes we've had people who've been denied observation permits because of participation in, very simple events like having outstanding parking tickets, for example, or having been at a protest and received a ticket on that kind of an offense. So that's pretty serious. But what the government tends to do more than that is impose a sort of an arbitrary ratio. So let's just say there's a day like this year, there were 16 sealing vessels that started out for the commercial seal hunt on March 28th. The federal government didn't know, apparently, how many of them would be actively sealing during the day. So they decided not to issue any observation permits for the next morning. They decided that instead of issuing observation permits, they would go out and look around and see for themselves how many boats were actively killing seals, and then they would decide who got an observation permit. And we had to move heaven and earth to force the Canadian government to change its position by midday, and we finally did get our permits. The next day, they determined that there was only 6 boats operating out there, and so they only issued 1 permit for 1 helicopter load of journalists to go out and document the commercial seal hunt. So, of course, we had over 20 journalists that were waiting to go out to the ice floes, and, of course, all of them working on deadline. And they were mostly denied access to the opening day of the commercial seal hunt as a result. We've seen this happen year after year, and it's prevented many people from getting out and documenting the commercial seal hunt. And what's frustrating about this as a Canadian is the fact that this hunt occurs in public space. The Northwest Atlantic belongs to all Canadians. The sealing industry does not own it, and yet the federal government essentially turns this public space over to the sealing industry and prevents the public from accessing the area freely. There is no other fishery in Canada, and that's what they consider the seal hunt to be, a fishery. There is no other fishery that happens in Canada that you need an observation permit to observe. So I think it says it very clearly. The Canadian government does not want the commercial seal hunt to be observed, and they will do whatever they can to prevent it from being observed. And the tactics that we've seen this year are nothing new. In 2006, we had 7 people at the Humane Society of the United States arrested and denied permits for the rest of the season because the federal government claimed that those people were in violation of their observation permits. As a condition of the observation permit, you need to remain 10 meters away from sealers, and they claimed that we had come slightly within that 10-meter buffer zone. Now, we've subsequently had a video forensics person analyze the footage of the event, and they have stated not only were we not within 10 meters, but we could not have been within 20 meters. But for the rest of that season, we were denied observation permits, and it made it very difficult for us to get footage of the hunt. That's exactly what the Canadian government wants. It can't deal with the images that we bring back from the hunt each and every year. So instead of trying to change the way in which the seals are killed or possibly end the commercial seal hunt, the Canadian government tries to block observation. And what's happened this year is nothing new. It happens every single year.
One of the real ironies for me is that they call it the Seal Protection Act, the law that says that an observer can't come within a half a nautical mile, I believe it is, of a seal. It's clearly directed at animal welfare groups that are trying to put a stop to this hunt, and actually they're the ones trying to protect the seals, and yet the government's calling. I mean, it's total doublespeak, the Seal Protection Act. I mean, it's just unbelievable to me. I wanted to ask you. Oh, go ahead if you wanted to respond to that. That's
well, just yeah. Sorry, I think that's a very good point. I mean, the only way that you can get up into the seal hunt with a minimum of interference from the Canadian government is if you have a sealing license. So if you're up there to club a seal, then or shoot a seal, then you get a permit that costs you $5. You can go anywhere you want in the region. You don't have to check in with the Canadian government. If you're there to observe the killing, you pay 5 times the price for your license. You're subjected to a criminal background check, and that license can be denied or withdrawn at any time that the federal government chooses to do so. So it's just ironic that the people that are up there with weapons, the people that are up there killing seals, have more protections under the law in Canada than the people who are peacefully documenting and observing the hunt.
Mm-hmm. Again, we're talking about this Canadian seal hunt that started on March 28th and is still ongoing. The quota that the Canadian government has issued is 275,000 harp seals. 98% of these are babies under 3 months. My understanding is the reason they go after babies is that the babies can't swim yet, so they're really easy targets. 80,000 seals have been killed so far, so there's a couple 100,000 more that they're planning to kill this hunt season. And there is this Canada's East Coast seal hunt is the largest marine mammal hunt in the world. There's an average annual kill of 300,000 harp seals. But there is a hopeful note here that I wanted to hit on, and that is that the European Union will vote soon, hopefully to pass a universal ban on all seal products coming from Canada. What do you think, if you could just give me a rundown of kind of an update on that situation, because you wrote about it recently. I think it was even today you wrote about some things like the sealskin prices are really low right now. Even some sealers are saying it's not worth their while. The European Environment Commissioner recently confirmed that he will propose a ban on seal products. So if you could just give us some idea of what you think, what are the hopeful aspects right now?
Well, I think right now it is, despite the fact that this hunt is tragically going on, this is a very hopeful time for the seals. We've been working for a number of years to close global markets for seal products, and a huge number of countries around the world have already banned seal products or announced that they're about to do so. Now, in 2006, the European Parliament passed a resolution calling on the European Commission to introduce legislation that would ban the trade of seal products within the European Union. And that was a historic event, and it's interesting to note that that resolution achieved the support of 425 members of the European Parliament, and that's the highest level of support for any resolution of its kind in the history of the European Parliament. So we can see that there is an overwhelming political will within the European Parliament to ban seal product trade. Now, the Commission responded and said it would conduct some studies into the humane aspects of the commercial seal hunt and, based on the results of those, decide whether or not to introduce a ban. Well, the great news is that the Environment Commissioner, Stavros Dimas, having completed those studies, has said he is going to proceed with a ban on trade in seal products originating from hunts that are inhumane. So if a country cannot prove that its hunt is humane, it will not be able to trade its products in the European Union. And having observed it for 10 years, I can guarantee you that the Canadian seal hunt will be at the top of that list. And I don't believe, if the EU does implement such a ban, that Canadian seal products will ever be traded in the EU again. Many people believe that an EU ban on seal product trade would spell the end of Canada's commercial seal hunt, and I do believe it would as well. We know that between a third and a half of the products that come from Canada's commercial seal hunt are traded in the European Union. And a ban of this nature would encourage a lot of other countries to follow suit, and so many markets that the Canadian sealing industry depends on would start shutting down.